My name's Andy McCaffrey. This is a series on the productive economy and how it sits within the political framework. I thought we'd look at one of the main items in the state budget. $25 billion is taken from the productive economy and the people who work in it, the people who form it, frame it, and provide the goods and services in New Zealand, and it's spent on welfare. And welfare has transformed over the last 30 years from something it once was to something quite different. And that has incredible consequences for hundreds of thousands of people and for those who produce the taxes to pay for it. Let's look first at the words.
Names. Names are terribly important. They guide the action of what you will do with this thing you have named. Cao Lu once asked Confucius, what would be the first thing he would do if put in charge of government? Confucius replied that it would be to rectify names. If names be not correct, language is not in accord with the truth of things. If language be not in accordance with the truth of things, affairs cannot be conducted with success. And I think Confucius was a wise man, and the wisdom of what he said there still rings down through the ages. Because the welfare state, starting off in 1935, has transmogrified. It has changed. And you can tell that by the words that are used in the social welfare sphere. For instance, talking of social justice and inequality, that means the state arrangement of wealth, of adjusting the wealth held by one section of the community and passing it to another. You can justify any action at all by that statement. So the remit that the original welfare state had to look after the welfare of those who could not look after it themselves by working is utterly changed by the idea of social justice, inequality, equating to the state adjusting the wealth of the citizens for an end they claim is to the good. Now, social development, heavens above, developing to what? Is it like a developing country? You'll go there 1 year and next year you'll find everyone significantly better off socially, economically. There's no end to social development you can do. And just remember, it will not be developed by the citizens, by their organisations, by their individual hopes, by their aspirations. It will be developed by the state. Now, social welfare once meant just welfare, and everyone knew it was the state that paid it. But social welfare, when you add the word social to something, well, it dresses up all nice and nice little homely talks and country halls by the society and the citizens. It's not. It's welfare administered by the state. And the latest one, social investment, well, it's difficult to get your head around this. It's welfare, but you spend it better earlier to not spend it later. The investment part of that is a total misnomer. So the words have changed because what is happening has changed entirely.
So we're emphatically talking about this vast, however it's described, social welfare system. One of the saddest books I've read in the last while is A History of the Social Welfare Department in New Zealand by Tim Garlick. It is an extraordinary tale of heroic endeavour and billions of dollars attempting what seems to be the impossible. And let's have a look at the consequences of what that is.
But before we go further down the track of this argument, let us immediately clarify the distinction between the welfare that started off in 1935 and the welfare that we're talking about today. Those unable to work by reason of age, infirmity, mental illness, or whatever reason that a person is not able to go out and do the most menial job in New Zealand. That is the welfare that credibly and wonderfully New Zealand built right on up to the mid and 70s and early 80s. And it is the boon of a civilized society, government and state that it should be so, and that we have a productive economy of such ability to pay for those people who cannot work is the result of the hard-working efforts of the people in the productive economy. And it is a good thing. But when you move to the people in the green square, welfare to those who could work, that is where it is all changed. So there you're looking at the destiny of people able to work, whether they're 18 or 45. On the right-hand column is what is offered in the productive economy, the world of work, the world of enterprise, the world of challenges, the world of opportunity. And in the productive economy, you can be a panel beater and hope to own your own panel beating shop. You might move off to be a qualified diesel mechanic. You might sell insurance. You might have a small farm. You might have a little business. Or you might spend your days in a chemist shop tending the till. But there's hope. There's a future there. And furthermore, even if you're just a tally slaughterman in the freezing works, cutting sheep's throats all day, you can take the money home and buy a house and buy a ute and feed your children and take pride in your ability to support yourself and those about you. You can gain experience. You might start off not knowing a hell of a lot what's happening in the office. For a few years, you'll have mastered whatever that trade or enterprise or industry is, and you might move up the ladder and get into all sorts of exciting possibilities. You've got a career ahead of you. You can take pride in your achievements. No one's going to look at a car that you fixed last week and say, geez, that's a bloody good job when it's parked at the lights. But you know, you did it, and when it out the shop door, it was in bloody good order, and it wasn't when it came in. You can own your own business. It's not easy, it's hard. But you can save up a few bob, borrow a few bucks from the bank, and start out with that crazy idea you had years ago for frozen rhubarb and make a fortune. And so you should. Because you'll have made achievements in this productive economy. You'll have things, marker posts you can say, well, I did a brilliant job on that particular conference organising, or I added a lot of value to the firm when I come up with that idea. And every week, week in, week out, you're paying tax to the government. So the government can employ civil service to mind the roads, to stop diseases coming across the border, to run a police force, the Navy, the Air Force, to set in place the things that as a civilized society we need. And your taxes built that, no one else's. You're contributing to society. And your income will hopefully go up over the years and you can save a few bucks for your retirement. And at work, well, you'll have mates, there'll be somebody there. A whole lot of people, and you're part of the social circle and the Christmas parties and whose kid's done what, and you've got a life. And that's always great because every day, well, there's always hope. Something will turn up, you'll meet someone how to do somewhere, and suggestion of a better job or another opportunity. And you can travel abroad and take up all sorts of interesting careers and excitements. And your children, you've got money coming in the door. You can buy them books. You can get them extra educational courses. You can buy all the little toys and trinkets. You can enlarge their life. You can pay for the sports events. You can give them a life that's got great satisfaction. And you can own a property. Save up a few bucks, borrow over your eyebrows, and you'll have a bit of garden to play with and a fence that's yours, and you can rearrange the furniture in the house and paint the walls the way you want them to. Because you're living independent of the state. You're an independent person with an income that supports you and those that belong to you, and you are an individual with pride and integrity, independent of the state. Because you can work, because you can own a business, because you can manage a business, because you can invest in a business. And all that is the gift if you work hard, if you take the risks of the productive economy. Well, let's move over to the other side of the ledger, and it's bleak indeed. There's no opportunity. If you're on the benefit in March at such a figure, you'll be on the same benefit in September, and nothing will have changed. It's the same money come in every week, and there's nothing you can do about that. you're helpless. You'll gain absolutely no experience. I mean, you can sit at home and watch educational videos on the TV, but that's not what most people do. Your experience is dim because you haven't got any money. Experiences like going to the movies, the theatre, the Philharmonic Orchestra, the beach, all those things cost money. And you're not going to have many of them, if any. There's no career, of course. You're not climbing up any ladder. You're stuck at the bottom of it. And the first rung is way beyond your reach. Very few people can get out of long-term welfare. It's enormously difficult. You can own a business. I mean, it's practically prohibited. If you go into a little business venture of your own, legal or illegal, you'll wind up in jail. You're defrauding the social welfare system. So there's no achievements, no pride. What you did last month and 6 months before is the same as you're doing this month. And you're not adding any value to society. I mean, you could go to the social welfare and say, listen, I know everybody's been paid for doing nothing, but I'm doing it better than all the other blokes. I deserve a rise in my benefit. I mean, it's just not happening. You're paying no tax. You're a net drain on the tax system. All those people you see on the motorway driving to work or getting the bloody tractors out on the farm or creating something in a factory or selling insurance or whatever, they are contributing tax so you can eat and you can live and you can have a roof over your head. But you're not contributing anything. And as for your social circle, well, money can buy your social circle. You know, you can join all sorts of interesting organisations, a fishing club, God knows what, but it takes money. You can't even afford a coffee. So you get a restricted social circle. You won't make any contacts among all your mates in the unemployed world because they don't have any contacts that would find jobs or do any damn thing of any kind. So there's no hope. And your children, your heart may bleed for the things you can't give them. It will just be a trail of tears as to the opportunities they might have had with not a great deal of money invested in extra educational things, dancing classes, music lessons, jiu-jitsu, the whole box and dice. You don't have any money for that. And you are totally dependent on the state. It rules every single aspect of your life. Your house, if you're in a state house, you're not painting the walls or doing the garden or putting up a new fence. There's nothing you can do but sit there and live in it. And listeners might say, God, you're awful bleak, Dan. That's terrible. Well, let me tell you, I've seen it close up, been amongst it and lived it. I've been to the outback of Australia, and you would weep for a people who lived 40,000 years in one of the hardest environments of the world and did a bloody good job of surviving in it, to see their desperation, the social disaster that has been built on them by being dependent on the government. And I've been up around northwestern United States and parts of the middle, and the worst thing that ever happened to the Native Americans was to be moved onto reservations, fed by the state, tended by the state, minded by the state. They'd have been thrown out among the canals of the middle America. If they'd have been pushed out on the ranches and bought a bit of land and got access to 160 acres, they wouldn't be in that situation today. And I've been to Ballymun, St. Louis, Baltimore and Glasgow and East London. And I can tell you those tall towers, the life in them is thoroughly and utterly depressing. No income will rise, there'll be no opportunities, there's no value added to society. It's a state of total hopelessness. And it's at a suburb near you. Once you move into the arms of the state, you are a state chattel. And the state, for all its wishes to be loving and kind, and God, don't the progressives overload, they're making a fortune out of administering the system. There's a lot of money to be made from poverty, as Thomas Sowell said. And it's true. I've seen it with my own eyes. I've lived it, and I've talked to the people who live in it. And that's something the planners never do.
So it all seems hopeless. President Lyndon Johnson in 1966-67 started off the war on poverty. It's had more success than the war on drugs, in that it created much, much more poverty than there was before. Spending so far is about $27 trillion, and there's nothing to show for it. So is there a cure for poverty? Can poverty be cured? Well, here's the good news. Yes, there most emphatically is. Poverty for the able-bodied can be removed. This is how it's done and what does it.
And why am I so confident it can happen? It's because this happened. This is the most important thing that ever happened in the history of human beings. From the 50, 80,000 years that we have been on Earth, this event, this outcome was the most important thing that ever happened. Because the history of the world right up to 1820 is a history of poverty, misery, famine, slavery, and general horribleness. Yes, we have the history of all the fine lords and emperors and so forth that lived in their fine castles and conquered other countries and did all those wonderful things and dressed in nice clothing. But 90% of humanity lived exactly the way the people in the world who today live on under $2 a day lived. And it was appalling, and it is appalling for those people at the moment. And then something happened that changed the entire world and built the world you live in. Every single thing you own, you use, the jobs you have, everything comes from this event, the beginning of the productive economy. And it started in England and Scotland, and I think the thinking was done in Edinburgh. Deirdre McClassick calls it the Great Enrichment. And she says it sprung from the ethics and the ethos that had started in the Dutch Republic, but existed only in England in the 1820s. And it was a culture of approval to starting and fostering businesses and enterprise. Instead of the great landowners and their greed being thought of as the wealthy and being disapproved of by everyone, no, businesses were created which brought prosperity to themselves and to the people about them. And people began to see over the next 80, 100 years that ownership of property, business, and the wages they created were to everyone's benefit. Now, Stephen Balch, a fellow in the University of Texas or somewhere, thinks that there was a shift at that time between two long-standing groups in society, the makers and the takers. And for all of previous history, the takers had looted the city, impoverished the peasants, and stolen everything to get their hands on because they had the might and the power and the swords. Daniel Hannan has another view. He considers it comes from the particular institutions of Britain: parliamentary supremacy, the rule of law, property rights, free trade, religious tolerance. And be that as it may, it's not an entire explanation. And Niall Ferguson, of course, calls it the Great Divergence, when the United Kingdom, different from every other place in the world, set out on a different economic trajectory. And you'll have heard it called Industrial Revolution, and you'll think, oh, we invented all these wonderful things and therefore we got rich. No, technology makes no sense outside of the productive economy. The trains become playthings for the rich, and factories are devoted to creating luxury goods, and so it had always been throughout history. On this occasion, factories, investments, machinery, insurance, trade, shipping was to the benefit of the ordinary person, and particularly to the person who got jobs and wages. They were no longer left, as Cobbett so well describes it in his pamphlets in the agrarian situation in England in the 1820s. It was the greatest event in the world, and it's happened spontaneously in only two places: in England in the 1820s and in the 1980s in China. Because that thing that happened in England in the 1820s, England and Scotland, the most important event of the world, not spontaneously, it had taken hundreds of years for the circumstances to arrive in England that made the, if you like, the seedbed for it to sprout and to grow, happened again in China in the 1980s. And you could find no more inhospitable place for the rise of a productive economy than China. Just survived Mao's disastrous Great Leap Forward, the state-induced famines, the incredibly low production of Chinese output caused by Marxism and communism. And lo, here and behold, in 1980, they start the productive economy. And it started because the ingredients of the productive economy were brought into place. First of all, there's security of property. The right for tenure of property was given to the farmers, the people, the businesses, all those who lived in China. That was the most important thing. The second ingredient was that there was enforcement of general laws by the state that guaranteed contracts. There was good regulations put in place for the conduct of business by and large, and business could conduct its affairs safe from the robbery of the state. The state believed in it. And also there was that ethos that Deirdre McCluskey talks about. It had always been in Chinese culture and society that trading was a good thing. Well, now it was possible to acclaim the growth of businesses, little capital investments, of the owning of houses, and all the other things that came as part of the growth of a productive economy. That ethos was present and is still present in China. And secondly, or thirdly, whatever, it was saved from the state pillaging it for political reasons. The state may wander off and build high-speed railways and bridges and useful infrastructure for the conduct of a productive economy, but the iron rice bowl was taken away. Oh yes, there are state-owned enterprises that look remarkably like our welfare system, but by and large, the opportunity for the Chinese people was to come from work in the productive economy. And in some sense, they were following the prescriptions of Lee Kuan Yew, an eminently wise man. Harry Lee had said that the future of Singapore was not in the state providing welfare for the people. The state would build assets for the people. They would build up the costs of health insurance by contributions in a fund that could be used when the need arose. They would build up retirement funds so as retirement would not come from a cash and carry affair within the economy, but would be available at the end of your life as having accumulated compound interest over that period of time. It took a diametrically different approach. And Kalpaway, the civil servant who set up most of the financial arrangements of Hong Kong, did the same. And so all over the world, countries which if you like, put the productive economy forward as the way to go forward are going to prosper. And those who think that they can make all of society wealthier by taking money from one side of the system and pouring it into the other for no work, no outcome, and the creation of hopeless misery in passive able-bodied welfare are in for a bit of a shake-up at some stage.
So the massive poverty inflicted on so many people across the world, the destruction of state economies, can be cured. Some countries, Germany, France, are moving to the edge of what it is possible to spend on social welfare. The French paradox, as I call it, is truly heroic. The French spend 56% of their GDP in the government, and yet you have to ask yourself, how's it working? Well, that's because the French have the most productive workforce in the world. Much, much more productive than Britons or Americans, than Germans. And such heroic efforts can keep such a system going for a very long time. But if it falters, what then?